Greetings, everyone. Thank you for returning to Old Lady Eleanor's library. Now, picture this moment. You're stretched out on a straw-filled mattress inside a drafty stone cottage in Yorkshire, England, during the harsh winter of the year 1347. A sharp wind slips through the gaps in the wooden walls, and each breath you exhale rises in faint, misty puffs into the freezing air. Beside you, your husband's calloused hand finds yours beneath the rough wool blanket. But this moment of tenderness is interrupted by the wet cough of your mother-in-law, who sleeps barely 3 feet away on her own pallet. Beyond her, your 2 young children shift restlessly in their shared bed. And in the corner, the pregnant sow that will feed your family through spring grunts softly in her pen. This is intimacy in the medieval world. Stolen moments between the snores of relatives, whispered endearments masked by the crackling of dying embers, and the constant awareness that every gesture, every touch, every breath is witnessed by someone. Privacy as we understand it today simply did not exist. The very concept would have been as foreign to a 14th century peasant as flying to the moon. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The single-room dwelling where you lie was home to perhaps 8 or 10 people spanning 3 generations. Your husband's elderly father occupies the place of honor nearest the hearth, his arthritic joints requiring warmth. The unmarried brother sleeps on the floor beside the door, ready to defend the household. 2 servants, if you're fortunate enough to afford them, curl up in the barn with the animals when the weather permits. But during the harshest months, they too crowd into this space, barely larger than a modern apartment bedroom. Yet somehow, within this maze of humanity, married couples found ways to express their love, to conceive children, to maintain the bonds that held families together. The methods they developed were born of necessity, refined through generations and passed down through whispered instructions from mother to daughter, father to son. The architecture of medieval homes reflected this reality. Even among the wealthy, the Great Hall served as the communal living space where the entire household gathered. The lord and lady might retreat to a sola, a private chamber, but even these rooms often housed multiple family members. Archaeological evidence from 13th century manor houses in England reveals that most bedchambers contained multiple beds, sometimes separated by nothing more than hanging tapestries or wooden screens. In the peasant cottage, space was even more precious. The single room served as kitchen, workshop, dining hall, and bedroom. The hearth provided the only source of heat and light, making it the natural gathering place for all activities. Furniture was minimal, perhaps a table that could be disassembled when not in use, a few stools, and the precious beds that represented significant investments for most families. The bed itself was a marvel of medieval engineering, designed not for comfort, but for survival. The frame was built high off the ground to avoid drafts and rodents. The mattress, a generous term for what was often little more than a sack filled with straw, feathers, or rags, was covered with whatever fabric the family could afford. The wealthy might have linen sheets, while the poor may do with rough wool or hemp. Multiple families often owned a single set of bed linens, washed perhaps once a month if water was available. But the physical constraints were only part of the challenge. Medieval society operated according to strict social hierarchies and codes of conduct that governed every aspect of daily life. The church taught that sexual desire was sinful, to be indulged only within marriage and only for the purpose of procreation. Public displays of affection were frowned upon, and marital relations were expected to be conducted with discretion and modesty. These moral constraints created a complex web of unspoken rules and subtle communications. A married couple might signal their intentions through seemingly innocent gestures, a lingering touch when passing a cup of ale, a meaningful glance across the hearth, a whispered comment about checking the animals in the barn. These coded messages had to be interpreted correctly by the intended recipient, while remaining invisible to the watchful eyes of parents, siblings, and servants. The timing of intimate moments required careful choreography. Most households followed a rhythm dictated by the seasons and the demands of agricultural life. During harvest time, when everyone worked from dawn to dusk, exhaustion often trumped desire. Winter brought its own challenges, the cold that made undressing dangerous, the early darkness that compressed all activities into a few precious hours around the fire, and the close quarters that made every sound audible to sleeping family members. Spring offered the best opportunities for privacy. As the weather warmed and the days lengthened, couples could escape to the fields under the pretense of checking crops or gathering herbs. The forest provided secluded spots for clandestine meetings, though these excursions carried risks. Bandits, wild animals, and the ever-present threat of discovery by neighbors who might gossip or report suspicious behavior to local authorities. Summer brought its own rhythm of opportunity and constraint. The long days of agricultural work meant that couples might find themselves alone in the fields during the heat of midday when others sought shade. But the harvest season also brought additional laborers, hired hands, relatives from neighboring villages, and migrant workers who further crowded the already cramped living spaces. The church calendar imposed additional restrictions on intimate relations. The medieval Catholic Church designated numerous feast days, fast days, and periods of penance during which marital relations were forbidden. Advent, Lent, and the weeks surrounding major religious holidays were times of mandatory abstinence, even within marriage. Couples were expected to refrain from sexual activity on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays, leaving only 4 days a week when intimacy was religiously sanctioned. Pregnancy brought its own set of challenges and opportunities. Church doctrine decreed that sexual relations should cease once a woman was visibly pregnant, and the period of purification after childbirth, typically 40 days, further restricted intimacy. Yet these same periods of enforced celibacy created anticipation and longing that intensified the eventual reunion. The midwife played a crucial role in managing these intimate aspects of married life. She was often the only person in the community with detailed knowledge of female anatomy and reproductive cycles. Her advice on timing, positioning, and contraception was sought secretly by women who dared not discuss such matters openly. The midwife's presence in the home during childbirth also provided one of the few opportunities for frank discussions about marital intimacy, conducted in whispered conversations, while the laboring woman's husband and male relatives waited anxiously outside. Children presented perhaps the greatest challenge to marital privacy. In most medieval households, children slept in the same room as their parents well into adolescence. The concept of separate bedrooms for children was unknown, except among the very wealthy. Young children were often oblivious to their parents' intimate moments, but older children posed a more delicate problem. The solution was a complex system of education and willful ignorance. Children learned to sleep deeply, to ignore certain sounds and movements, and to understand that some activities were strictly for adults. Parents developed techniques for minimal movement and maximum silence, conducting their intimate lives in a space smaller than a whisper. The church bed curtains served multiple purposes beyond warmth and privacy. These heavy fabrics, often the most expensive item in a peasant household, created a psychological barrier that allowed couples to imagine themselves alone even when surrounded by family members. The curtains muffled sound and blocked sightlines, creating a cocoon of relative intimacy within the communal space. But even within this enclosed space, couples had to navigate the physical challenges of medieval life. Bodies that had been unwashed for weeks or months, clothing that served as both day wear and night wear, and the constant presence of insects and vermin made physical intimacy a carefully orchestrated affair. The luxury of bathing was reserved for special occasions, perhaps once a month for the wealthy, far less frequently for the poor. The seasonal rhythms of medieval life created natural patterns of intimacy. Winter nights were long and cold, making the shared warmth of the marriage bed a practical necessity as much as an emotional desire. Spring brought the renewal of life and energy after the hardships of winter. Summer offered opportunities for outdoor privacy, while autumn's harvest celebrations provided rare moments of communal joy and relaxation. Economic pressures also influenced intimate relationships. In times of scarcity, the physical demands of survival could overwhelm emotional needs. Hunger, cold, and exhaustion were powerful dampeners of desire. Conversely, periods of relative prosperity, after a good harvest or successful trading venture, might bring renewed energy and optimism that translated into more affectionate relationships. The role of alcohol in medieval intimacy cannot be overlooked. Beer and ale were safer to drink than water in many areas, making mild intoxication a common state. Wedding celebrations, harvest festivals, and religious holidays provided opportunities for couples to relax their usual restraints under the influence of alcohol, though these same occasions often brought extended family and guests into the already crowded living spaces. The seasonal migration patterns of medieval life created additional opportunities for privacy. During summer months, many families would send their livestock to graze in distant pastures, requiring shepherds to sleep in the fields. Young men might spend weeks traveling to markets or fairs, temporarily reducing the household population. These absences created brief windows of relative solitude for married couples. The economic realities of medieval life meant that many couples delayed marriage until their 20s or 30s, when they had accumulated sufficient resources to establish their own households. This delayed gratification created intense anticipation and desire that had to be carefully managed within the constraints of Christian morality and social expectations. Arranged marriages were the norm among all social classes. Though the degree of family involvement varied, even in arranged unions, couples were expected to develop affection and compatibility over time. The intimacy that developed in these relationships was often deeper and more enduring than the passionate romances celebrated in medieval literature, precisely because it was forged in the crucible of shared hardship and mutual dependence. The legal framework of medieval marriage gave husbands significant authority over their wives' bodies and behavior. Canon law required wives to submit to their husbands' sexual demands, while simultaneously restricting those demands to reasonable frequency and purpose. These contradictory expectations created tension and ambiguity that couples had to navigate privately. The medieval understanding of female sexuality was heavily influenced by classical medical texts and Christian theology. Women were believed to be naturally more lustful than men, requiring constant vigilance and control. Yet the same texts acknowledged that female pleasure was necessary for conception, creating a complex web of desire and guilt that permeated intimate relationships. The practice of bundling, where courting couples were allowed to sleep in the same bed while fully clothed and sometimes bound together, demonstrates the elaborate methods medieval society developed to manage sexual desire within moral constraints. This practice, common in Northern Europe, allowed young people to experience physical closeness while theoretically preserving their virginity. Contraception, though officially condemned by the Church, was practiced throughout medieval Europe. Women passed down knowledge of herbs and techniques that could prevent pregnancy or terminate early pregnancies. This underground network of feminine wisdom operated in whispered conversations between mothers and daughters, midwives and patients, creating a parallel system of knowledge that challenged official religious doctrine. The medieval concept of courtly love, popularized in literature and song, created an idealized vision of romantic relationships that bore little resemblance to the reality of married life. These literary fantasies served as both inspiration and torment for couples trying to find romance within the constraints of their daily lives. The architectural evolution of medieval homes reflected changing attitudes toward privacy and intimacy. The gradual development of separate bedchambers, the addition of chimneys that allowed for heating of multiple rooms, and the increasing use of glass in windows all contributed to the possibility of more private, intimate lives. However, these improvements were limited to the wealthy and came slowly over several centuries. The Black Death of 1347-1351 AD fundamentally altered the dynamics of medieval households. The massive population loss meant that surviving families often had more space and resources than their predecessors. The psychological impact of widespread death also changed attitudes toward pleasure and intimacy, as people sought comfort and connection in the face of mortality. Religious reform movements throughout the medieval period created additional pressures on intimate relationships. The rise of Christianity, with its emphasis on spiritual marriage and celibacy, created new models of relationship that challenged traditional notions of marital intimacy. Some couples attempted to live as spiritual siblings, renouncing physical relations while maintaining emotional bonds. The guild system that dominated medieval urban life created new patterns of household organization. Master craftsmen, their wives, journeymen and apprentices often lived and worked in the same building, creating complex hierarchies of authority and intimacy. The master's wife might find herself responsible for managing the emotional and physical needs of young men far from their families, while maintaining appropriate boundaries and preserving her own marital relationship. The medieval understanding of time differed significantly from our modern conception. Without clocks, daily rhythms were determined by the sun, the church bells, and the natural cycles of work and rest. This organic approach to time created opportunities for spontaneous intimacy, but also made it difficult to plan private moments in advance. The role of music and storytelling in medieval intimacy cannot be underestimated. In a world without written entertainment, couples often shared songs, poems, and stories as forms of emotional connection. The bardic tradition of romantic ballads provided a vocabulary for expressing feelings that might otherwise have remained unspoken. The medieval kitchen, with its central hearth and communal cooking arrangements, was often the heart of household intimacy, couples working together to prepare meals, sharing tastes of food, and managing the complex logistics of feeding a large household developed a wordless communication and physical coordination that translated into their private moments. The ritual of going to bed in a medieval household was a complex choreography involving multiple family members. The order in which people retired, the arrangement of bedding, and the careful management of the dying fire all required coordination and understanding. Within this routine, couples had to find moments for private connection without disrupting the household's rhythm. The medieval concept of hospitality required families to welcome travelers and guests into their homes, often for extended periods. These visitors further compressed the already limited space and created additional challenges for maintaining marital privacy. The obligations of hospitality sometimes took precedence over the needs of the married couple. Testing the strength of their relationship, the seasonal celebrations of medieval life, harvest festivals, religious holidays, and life cycle events provided rare opportunities for community-wide relaxation of normal social constraints. These celebrations often featured dancing, drinking, and ritualized courtship behaviors that allowed married couples to express their affection more openly than usual. The medieval understanding of marriage as a sacrament meant that intimate relationships were believed to have spiritual as well as physical dimensions. This theological framework provided couples with a language for discussing their relationship that transcended mere physical attraction, creating possibilities for deeper emotional connection. The practice of pilgrimages offered medieval couples unique opportunities for privacy and intimacy. The journey to holy sites often required weeks or months of travel, during which couples could experience a degree of freedom from family and community oversight that was impossible in their daily lives. The shared hardships and spiritual experiences of pilgrimage often strengthened marital bonds. The medieval legal system's treatment of domestic violence and marital rape reveals the complex power dynamics within intimate relationships. While wives were expected to submit to their husbands, there were recognized limits to acceptable behavior. The community's role in policing these boundaries created additional pressures on couples to maintain the appearance of harmonious relationships. The medieval understanding of mental illness and emotional disturbance had significant implications for intimate relationships, conditions that we might recognize as depression, anxiety, or trauma were often attributed to spiritual causes or imbalances in bodily humors. Couples dealing with these challenges had to navigate them without modern therapeutic frameworks or pharmaceutical interventions. The role of extended family in medieval households created complex networks of alliance and obligation that influenced intimate relationships. A wife's relationship with her mother-in-law, a husband's responsibilities to his siblings, and the presence of unmarried relatives all shape the dynamics of marital intimacy. The medieval practice of fosterage, sending children to be raised in other households, created additional complications for parental intimacy. Parents had to balance their emotional needs with the practical requirements of their children's education and advancement, often making painful decisions about separation and reunion. The economic importance of marriage in medieval society meant that intimate relationships were always embedded within broader networks of property, inheritance, and social obligation. Couples had to navigate their personal desires within the context of family expectations and community standards. The medieval understanding of the body and its functions influenced intimate relationships in ways that are difficult for modern people to comprehend. The lack of privacy for basic bodily functions, the communal nature of hygiene practices, and the different standards of modesty all shaped how couples experience physical intimacy. The role of godparents in spiritual relationships in medieval society created additional layers of social obligation that influenced intimate relationships. These quasi-familial bonds extended the network of people who might have legitimate interests in a couple's private life. The medieval practice of rough music, community-organized public shaming of couples who violated social norms, created powerful incentives for maintaining the appearance of appropriate marital behavior. This community surveillance system meant that intimate relationships were never truly private, even within the confines of the home. The seasonal rhythms of medieval religious life created natural patterns of intimacy and abstinence that couples had to navigate. The Church's teaching that certain times were more appropriate for marital relations created a complex calendar of spiritual and physical obligations. The medieval understanding of conception and pregnancy influenced intimate relationships in ways that reflected both scientific ignorance and theological conviction. The belief that maternal thoughts and experiences could influence the unborn child created additional pressures on pregnant women and their husbands. The practice of wet nursing among the wealthy created unique challenges for marital intimacy. The decision to send an infant to a wet nurse was often motivated by the desire to resume marital relations more quickly. But it also created emotional complications and social obligations that affected the couple's private life. The medieval understanding of grief and mourning influenced intimate relationships in profound ways. The high rates of infant and child mortality meant that couples frequently had to navigate the emotional aftermath of loss while maintaining their physical and emotional connection to each other. The role of servants in medieval households created complex dynamics of authority and intimacy. The presence of domestic staff who might witness private moments, the need to maintain appropriate boundaries with young servants, and the practical challenges of managing household labor all influenced how couples experienced their private lives. The medieval practice of arranged remarriage after the death of a spouse created unique challenges for developing new, intimate relationships. Widows and widowers had to navigate the emotional complexities of forming new bonds while honoring the memory of their deceased partners. The medieval understanding of sin and redemption influenced intimate relationships in ways that created both constraint and possibility. The belief that marital intimacy could be sanctified through proper intention and behavior provided couples with a theological framework for understanding their physical relationship. The role of confession in medieval spiritual life meant that intimate relationships were subject to clerical scrutiny and guidance. The requirement to confess sexual sins to a priest created additional pressures on couples to conform to religious expectations while maintaining their private bond. The medieval practice of spiritual friendship, intense emotional bonds between individuals of the same sex, created complex dynamics within households that influenced marital relationships. These friendships provided emotional outlets that both complemented and sometimes competed with spousal bonds. The medieval understanding of honor and reputation influenced intimate relationships in ways that extended far beyond the private sphere. A couple's ability to maintain the appearance of proper marital behavior was essential to their social standing and economic opportunities. The seasonal patterns of medieval warfare created unique challenges for maintaining intimate relationships. The departure of men for military campaigns, the arrival of soldiers seeking shelter, and the constant threat of violence all influenced how couples experienced their private lives. The medieval practice of apprenticeship and service created complex household dynamics that influenced intimate relationships. The presence of young people from other families, the responsibilities of masters and mistresses for their charges, and the emotional complications of quasi-parental relationships all shaped the context of marital intimacy. The medieval understanding of old age and its effects on intimate relationships reflected both practical realities and cultural expectations. The belief that sexual desire naturally diminished with age provided couples with a framework for understanding changes in their physical relationship over time. The role of magic and folk beliefs in medieval culture influenced intimate relationships in ways that often conflicted with official religious teaching. The use of love potions, fertility charms, and protective amulets created alternative frameworks for understanding and managing marital intimacy. The medieval practice of pilgrimage created unique opportunities for spiritual and physical intimacy. The shared experience of religious devotion, the temporary freedom from social constraints, and the physical demands of travel all influenced how couples related to each other during these journeys. The medieval understanding of dreams and their significance influenced intimate relationships in ways that reflected both psychological insight and theological conviction. The belief that dreams could reveal divine will or demonic temptation created additional layers of meaning in couples' private experiences. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life provided rare opportunities for community-wide relaxation of normal social constraints. These festivals often featured ritualized courtship behaviors, dancing, and that allowed married couples to express their affection more openly than usual. The medieval practice of dowry and bride price created economic frameworks for intimate relationships that influenced how couples understood their mutual obligations. The exchange of property and resources at marriage created practical bonds that complemented emotional connections. The role of midwives in medieval society extended far beyond childbirth to include guidance on intimate relationships. These women often served as confidential advisors to married couples, providing practical advice on contraception, sexual technique, and marital harmony. The medieval understanding of the relationship between physical and spiritual health influenced intimate relationships in complex ways. The belief that sexual behavior could affect both bodily health and spiritual well-being created additional considerations for couples navigating their private lives. The practice of communal sleeping arrangements in medieval households created unique challenges for maintaining marital intimacy. The need to share beds with children, relatives, and servants required couples to develop subtle communication systems and exceptional discretion. The medieval understanding of female sexuality reflected both medical ignorance and theological conviction. The belief that women were naturally more lustful than men created contradictory expectations that couples had to navigate in their private relationships. The role of gossip and community surveillance in medieval society meant that intimate relationships were always subject to public scrutiny. The need to maintain reputation and social standing created additional pressures on couples to conform to community expectations. The medieval practice of trial marriage, cohabitation before formal wedding ceremonies, created unique opportunities for couples to develop intimate relationships while maintaining some degree of social acceptability. These arrangements often lasted for years before formal marriage vows were exchanged. The seasonal rhythms of medieval agricultural life created natural patterns of intimacy that reflected the cycles of work and rest. The intense labor of harvest time, the relative leisure of winter, and the renewal of spring all influenced how couples experienced their private relationships. The medieval understanding of conception and pregnancy influenced intimate relationships in ways that reflected both scientific ignorance and cultural expectation. The belief that conception required female pleasure created unique pressures and opportunities for couples navigating their physical relationship. The role of extended family in medieval households created complex networks of obligation and affection that influenced intimate relationships. The presence of parents, siblings, and other relatives required couples to balance their private needs with family responsibilities. The medieval practice of fosterage and apprenticeship created unique challenges for maintaining family bonds and intimate relationships. The need to send children away for education and training often separated couples from their offspring for extended periods. The seasonal patterns of medieval religious observance created natural rhythms of intimacy and abstinence that couples had to navigate. The Church's designation of certain periods as inappropriate for marital relations required careful timing and self-control. The medieval understanding of the body and its functions influenced intimate relationships in ways that are difficult for modern people to comprehend. The lack of privacy for basic bodily functions and the communal nature of hygiene practices created unique challenges for maintaining romantic connection. The role of music and storytelling in medieval culture provided couples with languages for expressing affection that transcended the constraints of daily life. The bardic tradition of romantic ballads and the practice of courtly love created idealized frameworks for understanding intimate relationships. The medieval practice of arranged marriage created unique challenges for developing intimate relationships within predetermined social frameworks. Couples had to navigate their personal desires within the context of family expectations and community standards. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life provided rare opportunities for community-wide relaxation of normal social constraints. These festivals often featured dancing, drinking, and ritualized courtship behaviors that allowed married couples to express their affection more openly. The medieval understanding of sin and redemption influenced intimate relationships in ways that created both constraint and possibility. The belief that marital intimacy could be sanctified through proper intention and behavior provided couples with theological frameworks for understanding their physical relationship. And so, as the fire dies down in that Yorkshire cottage in 1347 AD and the wind continues to howl through the timber walls, you and your husband find ways to love each other that transcend the cramped quarters and watching eyes. Your intimacy is measured not in stolen hours of privacy, but in the gentle pressure of fingers intertwined beneath rough wool, in the shared breath that mingles in the cold air, in the unspoken understanding that this moment, however brief, however witnessed, belongs to you alone. The medieval world taught its inhabitants that love, like survival, required ingenuity, patience, and an acceptance of limits that would seem impossible to modern sensibilities. Yet within those constraints, couples found ways to nurture affection, to create families, and to build bonds that sustained them through lives of unimaginable hardship. Their intimacy was not the grand passion of romantic literature, but something far more precious. A quiet flame that burned steadily through the long nights of a world where privacy was a luxury few could afford, and love was a choice, made new each day in the presence of witnesses who understood that some secrets were meant to be kept, some moments were meant to be shared, and some bonds were strong enough to survive anything the world could devise to test them. The techniques they developed, the compromises they made, and the love they created in the margins of communal life tell only part of this story. To truly understand how medieval couples navigated intimacy, we must delve deeper into the specific strategies they employed, the unspoken codes they lived by, and the extraordinary lengths they went to preserve something sacred in a world that offered no sanctuary. Consider the language of medieval intimacy. Not the words spoken, but the elaborate system of gestures, glances, and subtle communications that allowed couples to maintain their connection under constant observation. A wife might brush her husband's hand while passing him bread, holding contact for just a moment longer than necessary. He might respond by adjusting his position on the shared bench, creating the smallest possible space between their bodies while maintaining the appearance of propriety. These micro-communications were developed through years of practice and necessity. Margaret de Clare, wife of a minor nobleman in 14th century Gloucestershire, left behind a collection of letters that reveals the intricate dance of marital communication. Writing to her sister in 1356 AD, she describes how she and her husband developed a system of coded phrases that allowed them to discuss intimate matters even in the presence of their household. A comment about checking the grain stores meant a desire for privacy, while an observation about the fire burning low indicated that the evening's activities should be postponed. The physical architecture of medieval homes was adapted to support these covert communications. Beds were often positioned to allow for subtle eye contact across the room, while still maintaining proper social distances. The placement of the family's most precious possessions, religious icons, inherited tapestries, or carved wooden crosses, created natural focal points that could serve as reference points for silent communication. The art of medieval foreplay was necessarily different from modern concepts of romantic buildup. Physical preparation for intimacy had to begin hours before the actual encounter, through a series of increasingly intimate but still publicly acceptable interactions. A husband might help his wife with tasks that required close proximity, adjusting her head covering, assisting with heavy lifting, or sharing the same cup during meals. These moments of legitimate physical contact served to build anticipation and connection while maintaining social acceptability. The role of religious observance in this process cannot be overstated. Evening prayers, conducted by the head of household, provided one of the few opportunities for couples to kneel side by side, their voices joining in familiar words while their bodies shared the same small space. The rhythm of shared prayer created a sense of unity and intimacy that transcended the physical limitations of their circumstances. The seasonal rhythms of medieval life created natural patterns of intimacy that couples learned to anticipate and exploit. Spring brought not only agricultural renewal, but also the opportunity for couples to work together in the fields, their bodies moving in harmony as they planted seeds or tended young crops. The physical demands of this work created legitimate reasons for close contact, heavy breathing, and the removal of outer garments as the day grew warm. Summer offered the tantalizing possibility of outdoor privacy, but also brought its own challenges. The extended daylight hours meant that true darkness. The traditional cover for intimate activities came later and lasted for fewer hours. Couples had to learn to find intimacy in the twilight hours, when the household was settling into sleep. But complete darkness had not yet fallen. The harvest season created a unique set of opportunities and obstacles. The intense physical demands of gathering crops often left couples too exhausted for intimate connection. But the communal nature of harvest work also created opportunities for couples to slip away from the main group under the pretense of checking distant fields or gathering specific crops that grew in more secluded locations. Winter intimacy was perhaps the most challenging to navigate. The cold that made undressing dangerous also made the shared warmth of the marriage bed a practical necessity. Couples learned to find pleasure in the simple act of sharing body heat, their intimacy constrained by the multiple layers of clothing that served as protection against the bitter cold. The medieval understanding of time played a crucial role in these intimate relationships. Without mechanical clocks, the rhythm of daily life was determined by the sun, the church bells, and the natural cycles of work and rest. This organic approach to time meant that couples could not schedule intimate moments with precision, but it also created opportunities for spontaneous connection when circumstances unexpectedly aligned. The sound of the church bells that marked the hours also served as a communication system for intimate relationships. The bell for lords at dawn signaled the beginning of the day's work and the end of the night's privacy. The bell for vespers in the evening marked the approach of the time when intimate activities might be possible. Couples learned to interpret these oral cues as part of the complex choreography of their private lives. The medieval practice of communal bathing created unique opportunities for marital intimacy, though full immersion baths were rare luxuries. The weekly ritual of washing face and hands provided couples with legitimate reasons to handle each other's bodies with care and attention. The act of helping a spouse wash their hair or clean hard-to-reach areas became a form of intimate service that was both practical and emotionally meaningful. The preparation of food offered another avenue for intimate connection. In a world where hunger was a constant threat, the act of sharing specially prepared foods became a form of love language. A wife might save the choicest portions of meat for her husband, Or a husband might surprise his wife with honey or other rare delicacies obtained through trade. These food-based expressions of affection were both publicly acceptable and privately meaningful. The medieval understanding of scent and its role in attraction created additional layers of intimate communication. In a world where bathing was infrequent and deodorants unknown, couples learned to recognize and find comfort in each other's natural scents. The sharing of clothes, bedding, and personal items created a sensory intimacy that bound couples together. Even when physical contact was impossible, the role of touch in medieval marriages extended far beyond sexual contact. The simple act of grooming, removing lice from hair, treating wounds, or applying herbal remedies provided couples with opportunities for tender physical connection that was both necessary and intimate. These acts of care were often performed in the presence of other family members, making them publicly acceptable while privately meaningful. The medieval understanding of fertility and conception influenced intimate relationships in ways that created both pressure and opportunity. The belief that conception required female pleasure meant that husbands had incentive to ensure their wives' satisfaction, but it also created pressure to perform under circumstances that were far from ideal. The timing of intimate encounters often had to be coordinated with the woman's menstrual cycle, adding another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. The practice of medieval contraception, though officially condemned by the Church, created underground networks of knowledge and mutual support among married women. The sharing of herbal remedies, timing strategies, and other techniques for preventing pregnancy was conducted in whispered conversations between trusted female friends and relatives. This clandestine knowledge network provided couples with some degree of control over their reproductive lives, even within the constraints of religious doctrine. The medieval understanding of dreams and their significance influenced intimate relationships in ways that reflected psychological insight and theological conviction. Dreams were believed to reveal divine will, demonic temptation, or the hidden desires of the heart. Couples often shared their dreams with each other, creating a form of intimacy that transcended the physical limitations of their daily lives. The role of storytelling in medieval culture provided couples with another avenue for intimate connection: the sharing of tales. Whether religious parables, romantic ballads, or family histories created opportunities for couples to express their values, fears, and hopes in ways that might be difficult to communicate directly. The act of listening to a beloved partner's voice in the darkness, even surrounded by sleeping family members, created a form of auditory intimacy that was both private and profound. The medieval practice of pilgrimage offered married couples unique opportunities for intimacy that were impossible in their daily lives. The journey to holy sites often required weeks or months of travel, during which couples could experience a degree of freedom from family and community oversight that was otherwise unimaginable. The shared hardships of travel, sleeping under the stars, walking long distances, facing dangers together, created bonds of mutual dependence and shared experience that deepened their intimate connection. The physical demands of pilgrimage also created legitimate reasons for couples to care for each other's bodies in ways that would be inappropriate in their home communities. The treatment of blistered feet, the sharing of limited food and water, and the need to provide comfort during illness or injury all created opportunities for intimate service and care. The spiritual dimension of pilgrimage added another layer to these intimate experiences. The belief that the journey itself was a form of penance and spiritual purification meant that couples could approach their physical relationship with a sense of religious purpose and divine blessing. The achievement of the pilgrimage goal, reaching the holy site, was often celebrated with expressions of joy and gratitude that included physical intimacy. The medieval understanding of marriage as a sacrament meant that intimate relationships were believed to have spiritual as well as physical dimensions. This theological framework provided couples with a vocabulary for discussing their relationship that transcended mere physical attraction. The belief that marital love was a reflection of divine love created possibilities for deeper emotional and spiritual connection. The practice of spiritual direction, where married couples sought guidance from religious advisors, created formal channels for discussing intimate relationships within a religious framework. While these conversations were often conducted separately with husband and wife, they provided couples with shared vocabulary and understanding about the spiritual significance of their physical relationship. The medieval understanding of the body as a temple of the Holy Spirit created complex attitudes toward physical intimacy. The belief that the body was sacred meant that intimate relationships should be conducted with reverence and respect. But it also created anxiety about the potential for sinful pleasure. Couples had to navigate these theological complexities while maintaining their physical and emotional connection. The role of confession in medieval spiritual life meant that intimate relationships were subject to clerical scrutiny and guidance. The requirement to confess sexual sins to a priest created additional pressure on couples to conform to religious expectations, but it also provided opportunities for couples to receive guidance and absolution for their struggles with desire and temptation. The medieval practice of spiritual friendship created complex dynamics within households that influenced marital relationships. These intense emotional bonds between individuals of the same sex provided outlets for intellectual and spiritual connection that complemented spousal relationships. The balance between spiritual friendship and marital intimacy required careful navigation to avoid jealousy or social scandal. The seasonal patterns of medieval religious observance created natural rhythms of intimacy and abstinence that couples had to learn to navigate. The Church's designation of Advent, Lent, and other periods as inappropriate for marital relations required couples to develop strategies for maintaining emotional connection during times of physical separation. The medieval understanding of suffering as a path to spiritual growth influenced how couples approached the challenges of intimate relationships. The belief that hardship could lead to greater spiritual understanding meant that couples might interpret their struggles with privacy and intimacy as opportunities for spiritual development, rather than simply as problems to be solved. The practice of medieval mysticism created alternative models of intimate relationship that challenged conventional notions of marriage. The example of spiritual marriages, where couples renounced physical relations while maintaining emotional bonds, provided some couples with frameworks for understanding their relationship in purely spiritual terms. The role of extended family in medieval households created complex networks of obligation and affection that influenced intimate relationships. The presence of parents, siblings, and other relatives meant that couples had to balance their private needs with family responsibilities and expectations. The medieval practice of fosterage, where children were sent to other households for education and training, created additional challenges for maintaining family bonds and intimate relationships. The decision to send a child away was often motivated by economic or social considerations, but it also created opportunities for couples to rediscover their relationship without the constant presence of children. The seasonal migration patterns of medieval life created additional opportunities for privacy and intimacy. The movement of livestock to summer pastures, the travel required for trade and commerce, and the seasonal demands of different types of work all created temporary changes in household composition that couples learned to anticipate and exploit. The medieval understanding of hospitality required families to welcome travelers and guests into their homes, often for extended periods. These obligations created additional challenges for maintaining marital privacy. but they also provided opportunities for couples to demonstrate their unity and partnership in managing household responsibilities. The practice of medieval entertainment, music, dancing, storytelling, and games provided couples with opportunities for playful interaction that was both publicly acceptable and privately meaningful. The shared laughter and joy of these activities created emotional bonds that strengthened intimate relationships. The medieval understanding of gender roles influenced intimate relationships in ways that created both constraints and opportunities. The expectation that wives should be submissive to their husbands created power imbalances that affected intimate relationships. But it also provided clear frameworks for understanding mutual obligations and expectations. The practice of medieval courtship, even within arranged marriages, created opportunities for couples to develop emotional connections before and after their wedding. The exchange of gifts, the sharing of meals, and the gradual increase in physical contact all provided couples with ways to build intimacy within socially acceptable frameworks. The medieval understanding of love as a virtue to be cultivated rather than simply a feeling to be experienced influenced how couples approached their intimate relationships. The belief that love could be developed through practice and intention meant that couples could work to strengthen their bonds even when circumstances made spontaneous expression difficult. The role of medieval women in managing household economies created opportunities for intimate partnership that transcended simple physical attraction. The shared responsibility for managing resources, planning for the future, and maintaining family welfare created bonds of mutual dependence and respect that strengthened intimate relationships. The practice of medieval medicine created unique opportunities for intimate care and connection. The treatment of illness and injury often required couples to care for each other's bodies in ways that were both necessary and intimate. The knowledge of herbal remedies, the application of treatments, and the provision of comfort during suffering all created opportunities for tender, physical connection. The medieval understanding of death and its inevitability influenced intimate relationships in ways that created both urgency and acceptance. The constant presence of mortality meant that couples had to find ways to express their love and commitment within the constraints of uncertain lifespans and unpredictable circumstances. The practice of medieval funeral rites created formal opportunities for couples to express their grief and love in ways that were both publicly acceptable and privately meaningful. The rituals of mourning, the sharing of memories, and the provision of comfort during bereavement all created opportunities for intimate connection during times of profound loss. The medieval understanding of resurrection and eternal life influenced intimate relationships by providing couples with frameworks for understanding their bond as transcending earthly limitations. The belief that marriage was a temporary institution that would be transformed in the afterlife created complex attitudes toward the importance and meaning of intimate relationships. The role of medieval guilds and professional associations created additional layers of social obligation that influenced intimate relationships. The participation in guild activities, the maintenance of professional relationships, and the adherence to trade standards all required couples to balance their private needs with public responsibilities. The practice of medieval apprenticeship created unique household dynamics that influenced intimate relationships. The presence of young people from other families, the responsibilities of masters and mistresses for their charges, and the emotional complications of quasi-parental relationships all shaped the context of marital intimacy. The seasonal patterns of medieval warfare created challenges for maintaining intimate relationships that extended far beyond simple physical separation. The departure of men for military campaigns, the arrival of soldiers seeking shelter, and the constant threat of violence all influenced how couples experienced their private lives. The medieval understanding of honor and reputation influenced intimate relationships in ways that extended far beyond the private sphere. The need to maintain social standing, avoid scandal, and protect family honor created additional pressures on couples to conform to community expectations while maintaining their private bonds. The practice of medieval trade and commerce created opportunities for couples to work together in ways that strengthened their intimate relationships. The management of shops, the participation in markets, and the development of customer relationships all required couples to function as economic partners as well as romantic partners. The medieval understanding of education and its importance for family advancement created additional challenges for intimate relationships. The decision to invest in children's education, the choice of tutors or schools, and the management of educational expenses all required couples to balance their private needs with family responsibilities. The role of medieval law in governing intimate relationships created formal frameworks for understanding marital obligations and rights. The legal requirements for consent, the regulation of divorce and annulment, and the enforcement of property rights all influenced how couples understood their relationship and their mutual obligations. The practice of medieval taxation created additional economic pressures that influenced intimate relationships. The need to pay taxes, tithes, and other obligations required couples to work together to manage their resources and plan for their financial obligations. The medieval understanding of social mobility and its possibilities influenced intimate relationships by creating shared goals and aspirations. The hope for advancement, the pursuit of opportunities, and the management of social relationships all required couples to function as strategic partners in addition to romantic partners. The role of medieval technology in daily life created opportunities for couples to work together in ways that strengthened their intimate relationships. The management of agricultural tools, the maintenance of household equipment, and the adaptation to technological changes all required couples to function as practical partners as well as emotional companions. The practice of medieval record-keeping created formal documentation of intimate relationships that provides modern historians with insights into the daily lives of medieval couples. The preservation of marriage contracts, property agreements, and personal letters all contribute to our understanding of how medieval couples navigated their intimate relationships. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life provided rare opportunities for community-wide relaxation of normal social constraints. These festivals often featured dancing, drinking, and ritualized courtship behaviors that allowed married couples to express their affection more openly than usual. The medieval understanding of music and its role in expressing emotion provided couples with additional languages for intimate communication. The sharing of songs, the participation in musical performances, and the use of musical instruments all created opportunities for couples to connect on emotional levels that transcended the limitations of spoken language. The practice of medieval letter writing for those who possessed literacy created opportunities for intimate communication that could transcend physical separation. The exchange of written messages, the preservation of correspondence, and the development of private codes and references all provided couples with ways to maintain their connection even when circumstances kept them apart. The medieval understanding of astronomy and its influence on human affairs created additional frameworks for understanding intimate relationships. The belief that celestial movements affected human behavior and emotions provided couples with explanations for the rhythms and changes in their relationship that went beyond simple personal preference. The role of medieval superstition and folk belief in daily life created additional layers of meaning and ritual around intimate relationships. The use of charms, the observance of lucky and unlucky days, and the practice of protective rituals all provided couples with ways to understand and influence their intimate connection. The practice of medieval gift-giving created opportunities for couples to express their affection in ways that were both publicly acceptable and privately meaningful. The exchange of personal items, the creation of objects, and the provision of special foods or treats all served as languages of love that could operate within the constraints of medieval social expectations. The medieval understanding of memory and its importance for maintaining relationships created additional pressures and opportunities for intimate connection. The need to remember important dates, shared experiences, and mutual obligations all required couples to maintain active engagement with their relationship history and shared identity. The practice of medieval storytelling provided couples with opportunities to create shared narratives about their relationship that could strengthen their intimate bond. The development of private jokes, the sharing of family stories, and the creation of mutual mythology all provided couples with ways to understand their relationship as unique and special. The seasonal rhythms of medieval religious life created natural patterns of intimacy that reflected the Church's understanding of appropriate times for different types of spiritual and physical activity. The observance of feast days, fast days, and periods of penance all influenced how couples experienced their intimate relationship within the broader context of Christian life. The medieval understanding of community and its role in supporting individual relationships created networks of mutual obligation and support that influenced intimate relationships. The participation in community activities, the provision of mutual aid, and the maintenance of neighborhood relationships all required couples to balance their private needs with their public responsibilities. The practice of medieval dispute resolution created formal mechanisms for addressing conflicts that might arise within intimate relationships. The use of mediation, the intervention of religious authorities, and the application of customary law all provided couples with ways to resolve their differences without destroying their relationship. The medieval understanding of virtue and its cultivation influenced intimate relationships by providing couples with shared goals and standards for their behavior, the pursuit of Christian virtues, the avoidance of sin, and the development of moral character all created frameworks for understanding the purpose and meaning of intimate relationships. The role of medieval literature and its portrayal of love and romance created cultural expectations and ideals that influenced how couples understood their intimate relationships. The example of courtly love, the celebration of romantic devotion, and the exploration of the tensions between passion and duty all provided couples with vocabularies for understanding their own experiences. The practice of medieval pilgrimage created opportunities for couples to experience their relationship in new contexts that could deepen their intimate connection. The shared journey, the common goal, and the temporary freedom from normal social constraints all provided couples with ways to rediscover and strengthen their bond. The medieval understanding of healing and its connection to spiritual well-being influenced intimate relationships by creating opportunities for couples to care for each other in ways that were both practical and emotionally meaningful. The treatment of illness, the provision of comfort during suffering, and the celebration of recovery all created opportunities for intimate connection and mutual service. The seasonal patterns of medieval agricultural life created natural rhythms of work and rest that influenced intimate relationships. The intense activity of planting and harvest seasons, the relative leisure of winter months, and the renewal of spring all provided couples with different opportunities and challenges for maintaining their intimate connection. The medieval understanding of time and its passage influenced intimate relationships by creating awareness of the temporary nature of earthly life and the importance of making the most of available opportunities for connection and love. The recognition of mortality, the appreciation of present moments, and the hope for eternal reunion all shaped how couples approached their intimate relationships. The practice of medieval hospitality created opportunities for couples to demonstrate their unity and partnership in ways that strengthened their intimate bond. The welcome of guests, the provision of food and shelter, and the maintenance of household harmony all required couples to function as effective partners while maintaining their private connection. The medieval understanding of weather and its effects on daily life created additional challenges and opportunities for intimate relationships. The need to adapt to seasonal changes, the management of weather-related hardships, and the celebration of favorable conditions all influenced how couples experienced their intimate connection within the broader context of survival and prosperity. The role of medieval animals in daily life created additional contexts for intimate relationships that reflected the interconnectedness of human and natural worlds, the care of livestock, the management of working animals, and the appreciation of pets all provided couples with opportunities to express their nurturing instincts and their capacity for care and responsibility. The practice of medieval craftsmanship created opportunities for couples to work together in ways that combined practical necessity with artistic expression. The creation of household objects, the maintenance of tools and equipment, and the development of skilled techniques all provided couples with ways to collaborate that strengthened their intimate partnership. The medieval understanding of beauty and its role in human experience influenced intimate relationships by creating shared appreciation for the aesthetic dimensions of life, the enjoyment of music, the appreciation of visual beauty, and the celebration of artistic achievement all provided couples with ways to connect on levels that transcended the merely practical aspects of their relationship. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life provided opportunities for couples to participate in community activities that strengthened their intimate bond while fulfilling their social obligations. The observance of religious holidays, the participation in seasonal festivals, and the maintenance of cultural traditions all created contexts for couples to express their unity and shared identity. The medieval understanding of mystery and its role in human experience influenced intimate relationships by creating awareness that some aspects of love and connection transcended rational understanding, the acceptance of mystery, the appreciation of the unknown, and the celebration of the inexplicable, all provided couples with ways to approach their intimate relationship with wonder and reverence. The practice of medieval prayer and meditation created opportunities for couples to share spiritual experiences that deepened their intimate connection. The participation in religious services, the observance of private devotions, and the development of spiritual disciplines all provided couples with ways to connect on levels that transcended the purely physical aspects of their relationship. The medieval understanding of light and darkness and their symbolic significance influenced intimate relationships by creating awareness of the sacred dimensions of physical intimacy. The association of light with divine presence, the understanding of darkness as both mystery and danger, and the appreciation of the interplay between illumination and shadow all provided couples with rich symbolic vocabularies for understanding their intimate experiences. The seasonal rhythms of medieval life created natural patterns of intimacy that reflected the deep connection between human relationships and the natural world. The renewal of spring, the abundance of summer, the harvest of autumn, and the rest of winter all provided couples with metaphors and frameworks for understanding the cycles and changes in their intimate relationship. The medieval understanding of silence and its role in human experience influenced intimate relationships by creating appreciation for the power of wordless communication, the sharing of silent moments, the communication through touch and gesture, and the development of intuitive understanding all provided couples with ways to connect that transcended the limitations of spoken language. The practice of medieval work and its integration with daily life created opportunities for couples to collaborate in ways that strengthened their intimate partnership. The sharing of labor, the coordination of tasks, and the achievement of common goals all provided couples with ways to express their love through practical service and mutual support. The medieval understanding of home and its significance as a sacred space influenced intimate relationships by creating awareness of the importance of creating and maintaining environments that supported love and connection. The arrangement of living spaces, the creation of beauty within practical constraints, and the establishment of routines and traditions all provided couples with ways to express their commitment to their shared life. The seasonal patterns of medieval religious observance created opportunities for couples to share spiritual experiences that deepened their intimate connection while fulfilling their religious obligations. The observance of holy days, the participation in seasonal liturgies, and the practice of seasonal devotions all provided couples with ways to understand their intimate relationship within the broader context of their faith and their community. The medieval understanding of journey and its role in human experience influenced intimate relationships by creating awareness that love itself was a form of pilgrimage that required dedication, perseverance, and faith. The appreciation of the journey as well as the destination, the acceptance of hardship as part of the path, and the celebration of milestones and achievements all provided couples with ways to understand their intimate relationship as a sacred adventure that transcended the limitations of their daily circumstances. And so, as you lie once again in that Yorkshire cottage in 1347 AD, listening to the wind howl through the timber walls and feeling your husband's calloused hand find yours beneath the rough wool blanket, you understand something that centuries of privacy and luxury have perhaps forgotten. Intimacy was never about the space you had, but about the space you created. Love was never about the silence you could buy, but about the understanding you could build in the noise. In a world where privacy was impossible, couples discovered that true intimacy lived not in isolation, but in the choice to be tender despite witnesses, to whisper secrets that everyone could hear, but only lovers could understand, and to find the sacred in the utterly ordinary moment when two hearts beat close enough to share the same breath, the same hope, the same quiet defiance against a world that offered them everything except solitude. And somehow, that was enough.